So just as we're all starting to get excited about vaccinations, more uncertainty. Canada's National Advisory Committee on Immunization recommends pausing the use of AstraZeneca for anyone under the age of 55. So this recommendation comes after reports of rare blood clots in patients outside of Canada, mostly young women. So what does this mixed messaging mean for you?
Well, I might as well just jump right in and tell you that I've had the AstraZeneca vaccine. I can also tell you I'm not under the age of 55. But I will also just add to that that yesterday I was off, and I'm very rarely off work. I had a massive headache and I couldn't shake it. I think it was due to fatigue. I don't have a headache today. I'm back. I definitely started to look into what are the symptoms of a potential clot. And, you know, it's 1 in a million. There are no cases here in Canada, but I did get calls. I got calls from my mother, from my brother, from friends, and they all said, I'm not getting it. What do you think? And I'm going, no, let's wait till we hear more detail.
Are you scared?
Wow.
No, I'm not scared. But what I am scared about is that the knock-on effect, what other people might think. And I'm hearing it. People are saying, I'm not getting that vaccine. My mother, her first comment to me was, well, I got the Pfizer vaccine and I've had both, so I'm kind of glad I got it. I said, thanks, Mom. But, you know, I do think that we have to be cautious that we don't automatically abandon it until we have more data. And the problem with these vaccines is that, you know, the efficacy rate, you see it, but we don't know if you prolong the second dose or what happens. And we're getting more and more data. As we get more data, we reevaluate it.
Patty, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I really appreciate it. And in some ways, it feels like this information, while it was clumsy coming out, it's kind of happening exactly as it's meant to be, because vaccines developed in lightning speed during a pandemic can't be tested on hundreds of thousands of people. But once they are, real world data can be gathered. And that feels like what's happened here. The vaccine needed a large enough population for things to be observed. And they observed, you know, about 25 reports of rare blood clots out of 20 million vaccines given across, I think, 5 European countries. And that led to 9 deaths. It's still scientifically, like what you're saying, Patty, it's still considered a rare event. You know, German officials put it at maybe 1 in 100 and 1 in 100,000, which is still
125, yeah.
Yeah, still less risky than, it sounds like, than a woman taking birth control, which can also lead to blood clots. But it's so tricky because it doesn't, I'm glad to hear you say everything that you've said, but I think for a lot of people, it still feels very scary. And I wonder if AstraZeneca will recover.
You know what? Can I just throw out there? I just want to say very quickly, AstraZeneca has done, in my opinion, not the best communication job.
No.
They haven't been front and center. And to say that, you know, blood clots, 8 in 10,000 when people are on the birth control. So I think it's understanding the facts, be informed. But of course, I'd love to hear from what others have to say about it, because I'm sure no one here other than me has probably had it.
No, we haven't, but my parents have both had their first dose of the Pfizer, you know, and they're kind of today going a little bit of this, you know, and unfortunately their cohort, it has been largely vaccine hesitant. There are thousands of open slots, at least in different parts of Ontario. They can't get bodies in those seats to get the vaccine. It's a real issue, and this doesn't help. I don't know that it's all about this, but it is about communication. It is about evolving science, and it's also the fact that as humans, we're wired to go and focus on the worst case scenario. That is a method of survival. So we know that it is, for example, safer to drive our car, safer to fly a plane, in a plane, than it is to drive our car. But no one is jumping out of their cars and not driving anymore. You know, like that's it's an interesting thing, the way our brains are wired. But to me, it is about communication. It is about following science. My whole thing right now is about the interval of doses, because there is real world studies now that are showing that the efficacy is dropping off a cliff for older people who only get 1 dose. And the longer you wait, you know, that has real world implications. So on the one hand, it's like everybody get vaccinated, so at least everybody's got 1 dose. Then the flip side is, but when the science evolves, are we quick enough to pivot? Because that makes a huge difference. That's where I'm at, is how quick are we to accept the pivot?
Yeah. I think there's a bigger
Well,
issue too when you look at Canada. We are one of the worst in terms of vaccination and
Yeah.
getting the rollout and getting them in. Last I looked, we were about 50th.
yeah, I want to go to social media and Melissa on Facebook. Melissa said, today I made the decision officially to wait for one of the other brands of vaccine. I suspect many people will do the same. We still want the vaccine, but the safest option, especially in provinces, rural areas where there isn't immediate danger of contracting the virus. I wonder, Melissa, if you've heard what Patty has said and maybe have reconsidered. I think it's also really interesting, though, that we now have a vaccine hierarchy where certain vaccines are considered better and people want those, as Melissa is saying, over AstraZeneca. And even referring to vaccines by their brand name is interesting to me. In the past, we would refer to polio vaccine, measles vaccine. We didn't have company names associated with our vaccines. Right now, with COVID, we're not referring to it as COVID-19 vaccines. We're referring to them as Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca. And I wonder if this is part of vaccine confusion and also undermining vaccine efficacy and trust in science. Because when you're attaching a company name to a medicine that helps save lives, it tells you how we have evolved from 50 years ago when people were developing vaccines and eradicating diseases for humanity to now associating a business and corporations with this development. And I wonder if that also means a lack of cooperation between people who are developing vaccines for their respective corporations. Very quickly, I just want to give you a bit of a science history lesson. Maurice Hilleman, I'm obsessed with him lately. He is considered the godfather of vaccines. He's developed so many of them. He used to work for a huge pharmaceutical company, and he was developing a vaccine where his research was a little behind another company. What he did was he put aside his ego, and he told his company, acquire their science, buy it. It cost his company a lot of money to acquire the other scientists' research for him, Maurice, to be able to work on this vaccine that ended up going around the world and saving people's lives. Our companies, is Big Pharma doing that right now? Are they sharing research? Can AstraZeneca call up Moderna, call up Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer and be like, hey, can you help us out with this little problem? I think that part of this is a problem where we're branding vaccines that save lives. This, to me, is scary.
It's really interesting, Lainey. I'd love to know the answer if they are sharing knowledge. It's a really important question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Listen,
Go ahead, Mel.
No, I was just going to say it's constantly evolving, and I think that's really hard for us layman citizens who are not scientists but are trying to make it feels like life and death decisions for us and for our parents or grandparents and other family members. And I think that this is, we're going to look back on this time and it's going to be very interesting. I think point being, let's just hope that everybody is getting them.
But it's not new, Mel. It's not new. We've all talked about the erosion in the trust in science. Vaccines aren't new, right? So when they developed, for example, measles, the vaccine, the first version in 1963 had some side effects. Dr. Hilleman then 4 years later released the improved version of the vaccine out to the public. It's still the version that's being used today. So this has always been the vaccination process. This has always been how vaccines and science work. But now, for some reason, our generation has stopped believing in that process or stopped trying to understand it.